So what happens when one guy basically answers everything? I mean, every big question you can think of. Well, that's kind of the situation Western philosophy found itself in after Aristotle. For the next 2,000 years, thinkers were left scrambling, trying to figure out what was even left to know. And believe me, their journey, it completely transformed the world. Yeah, this was the question, right? The one that haunted thinkers for literally 2 millennia. You have to understand, Aristotle didn't just have a few good ideas. He built this massive, all-encompassing system that explained everything from, I don't know, biology to logic. It really felt like he'd run the race and crossed the finish line, so what now? Where do you even go from there? And just look at the sheer scale of this journey. We're talking about a huge chunk of history, from the fall of the Roman Empire all the way through the Middle Ages. And it wasn't a straight line, not at all. The path of Western thought was this long, winding road. The very idea of what knowledge even is was up for grabs. It was debated, it was redefined, and it was completely transformed. Okay, so to really get what happened after Aristotle, you first got to appreciate just how, well, complete his system was. He wasn't just another smart guy with a toga. Think of him as the ultimate architect. He created a single coherent blueprint that could explain, well, pretty much everything. And he had this incredible toolkit to do it. You had things like the four causes, which let him break down how anything comes to be, from a sculpture to a chair. Then there's act in potency. That's how he explained change, like how an acorn has the potential to become a mighty oak tree. But the real key, the master tool, was his inductive method. For Aristotle, it was simple. All real knowledge starts with what you can see, touch, and hear. It starts with your senses. It's wild, right? He didn't just explain the world. He gave us the instruction manual for thinking about the world. He literally invented the syllogism. It's like a little logic machine for building arguments that actually hold up. With this, you could finally spot the difference between a real solid argument and the clever-sounding nonsense the Sophists were famous for. But then, everything changed. And I mean dramatically. Alexander the Great comes along and his conquests just shatter the old world. The small, familiar city-states were gone, replaced by this huge, sprawling, multicultural empire. And you know what? A political earthquake like that, it's going to trigger a philosophical one too. Suddenly, the world felt a lot bigger, a lot more chaotic, and honestly, a little scarier. So the big questions philosophers were asking, they shifted. The focus moved away from these grand questions about the cosmos and turned inward to the individual. The new question on everyone's mind was, okay, in this crazy, confusing new world, how do I live a good life? How can I find happiness? And just like that, ethics became the star of the show. Philosophy wasn't just for dusty lecture halls anymore. It became a practical, hands-on guide to living. This is when you see schools like Stoicism and Epicureanism pop up. And really importantly, this is when we see the first real conversation starting up between that classic Greek reason and the new religious faiths coming out of the East. Yeah, that conversation, it pretty quickly turned into a takeover. A new runner entered the race, and it changed everything. The rise of Christianity wasn't just the arrival of a new religion. It brought with it a totally new way of thinking about knowledge and truth, a framework that would go on to dominate Western thought for more than a millennium. And you can see here just how different these two worldviews were. They were on completely different tracks. For the Greeks, right, the source of truth was your own mind, your ability to reason and observe the world. But for Christian theology, truth wasn't discovered. It was revealed by God. And the goal wasn't just to understand the world, it was salvation. It was about your eternal soul. So, in this new world order, philosophy got a new job description. It became what they called the handmaiden of theology. Think about that. All those amazing tools, logic, reasoning, argumentation, they weren't being used to question everything anymore. Instead, their new purpose was to help understand, explain, and defend the truths that came from faith. And the guy who really perfected this, the master architect of this new way of thinking, was St. Augustine. He was just an absolute genius. He brilliantly took the ideas of Plato and used them like scaffolding to build this incredible intellectual fortress for Christian belief. And this quote from him, it just perfectly captures his whole project. For Augustine, faith always comes first. You don't use your reason to try and prove your way to faith. No, you start with faith, and then you use reason as a tool to explore and understand what you already believe. It's a total flip of the script. It's faith seeking understanding. All right, so the next leg of this 2,000-year race takes place in a totally new arena, the medieval university. These were the brand new hotspots for intellectual life, and it's here that Aristotle's logic gets rediscovered, dusted off, and sharpened into this razor-fine tool for debating some seriously complex theological questions. And one of the biggest, most knockdown, drag-out fights they had was over something called the problem of universals. Now, I know, it sounds super abstract, but stick with me because the question is actually fascinating. Think about it. When we use a word like beauty, is that a real thing? Does beauty itself exist somewhere? Or is it just a handy word, a label we slap on things we like? So you basically had two teams in this debate. On one side, you had the realists. They said, yep, universal ideas like goodness or beauty are totally real. They exist out there as perfect forms, kind of like what Plato was talking about. But on the other side, you had the nominalists. They were like, no way. Goodness is just a name. Nomen is Latin for name. It's a label we use. The only things that are really real are the individual specific things we see in the world. For hundreds of years, the realist view, that Platonic Augustinian way of thinking, pretty much ran the show. But then came the grand finale, the brilliant climax of the whole medieval period. And it was all thanks to one man who brought Aristotle roaring back from the sidelines and put him right in the center of the action. A guy named Thomas Aquinas. What Aquinas did was just incredible. He basically did for Aristotle what Augustine had done for Plato all those centuries before. He meticulously showed everyone that Aristotle's focus on logic, on the physical, observable world, that wasn't a threat to Christian faith. Actually, it could be used to understand it even better, to shine a new light on it. And his whole theory of knowledge was pure Aristotle, through and through. For Aquinas, knowledge doesn't just beam down from some heavenly divine realm. Nope, it starts right here, on the ground, with our senses. It's a simple process. We see a specific, beautiful flower. Our mind, what he called the active intellect, chews on that sensory info, and then, from that specific image, it pulls out, it abstracts the universal idea of beauty. He literally brought philosophy back down to earth. So when you look back, this whole 2,000-year marathon was this incredibly complex dance between reason and faith, between what we can figure out and what we believe. Aquinas managed to create this beautiful, powerful harmony between the two. But that leaves us with a pretty big question for our own time, doesn't it? In our world, a world that runs on science and data, has reason finally won the race all by itself? Or does it still need a dance partner?